So tonight, everyone, as I just said, from reaction to response, it's my absolute pleasure to invite Paul Cheetham, an EQ certified coach with us since 2017 in our network. And Paul is a good friend of mine. We certified together many years ago. But I'd like to allow you, Paul, to introduce yourself and tell everyone who's watching and attending tonight a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much for that, David, and appreciate you inviting me along tonight. I think just to say, first and foremost, I'm a human being. I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather, again, as of 2 weeks ago, so I have a new
Wow.
grandson. Born and bred in a place called Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. I do love to go and watch Newcastle United Football Club, so I like a bit of football. I like a beer a little bit, and I love getting on karaoke and singing a song or two now and again. So that's the important stuff. In terms of the work things, my background is in HR, so I had a 30-year career in HR, which off the back of that course we jointly attended in 2017, I gave up that career to set up my own business in the middle of a pandemic, partly because of the awareness and the emotional intelligence practice to help people in business be more joyful and successful using emotional intelligence as a vehicle for that. So that's a bit about me, a bit of a snapshot there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Paul. And for those attending tonight, as I said just before, if you've just joined us, please feel free to use the chat as we go along. Ask us a question, interact with us in this way. We're also able to bring you on as a speaker, but for privacy, no one's details will be shared on the recording that you can watch a little bit later on YouTube as well. So tonight we're really talking about going from reaction to response. And I'm not going to spend the whole time with the screen on, but I would like to go in and out a little bit as we do that. For those of you who are brand new to 6 Seconds, we are the biggest network of emotional intelligence practitioners and certified and people interested in spreading emotional intelligence around the world. And our goal is to have 1 billion people practicing and using the skills of emotional intelligence by 2039. So we still have a little time to go. It'll also be one of our founders' 100th birthdays. And so we're really hoping to celebrate that moment. And as I said before, our upcoming theme for 2025, as I've just learned in our global call, is youth and being able to create social impact with youth around the world as well. And tonight we really want to talk about those moments of moments when we're on autopilot, moments when we perhaps respond to somebody uh, in a less favorable way, almost like a reaction, those quick spur of the moment reactions that we have in life. And I'm sure you've all experienced one or two at least this year, perhaps even, well, hopefully not this week, it's only Monday, but in the last moments, think about that communication with others and how you've perhaps responded in a less than ideal way. And so we really want to think about how we shift from one aspect to another, how we can really put a little bit of space in between that. And that's very much what 6 Seconds is about. And some of those ways to create space between moments are through our certifications, our reports, our assessment tools, our case studies. And there's a lot of material that you can find on our website, www.6seconds.org. And I'd encourage you to have a look at that as well. But you might want to go deeper. And that's why I have Paul on as a guest tonight, who's a certified coach and is able to work with people to really help them understand how they go from one to the other. Perhaps you're like this lady, you receive an email and bang, you have a thought. Perhaps you are like this fellow who lets out that aggression down a telephone box, a little bit old school, this you might say, but even down one's phone or online in some way where we're really not thinking about our feelings, but we're just going with those. And then later you've had a moment where you've regretted that decision. Perhaps this fellow here regretting that email, thinking about that difficulty that he had in life. And I just want to share just one other idea and then ask Paul to contribute here. I've got this graph here taken from our business case of EQ, where we look at the costs of a low functioning EQ organization. Maybe you follow that cycle where we see high stress, low engagement, going around to a decline in company culture, perhaps a lack of or low emotional intelligence, disconnection, bad communication, damaged trust. Paul, is this a familiar cycle to you in the world of HR that you lived and worked in for many years?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it varies from organization to organization. But I think I've worked in probably every business that I've worked in. There's always been a sense of having people develop, but very much in that technical discipline, whether that be like finance and accountancy or marketing or customer service, employment law, whatever that thing may be. But actually, the bit where people didn't get help, even in people industries like HR, in terms of being able to understand like how emotions sort of impact on you and your ability to be able to notice it, do something with it, and then point it in the right direction.
Mhm.
So none of the organizations, maybe other than the last one where I started doing some of that within a tech business, just people weren't doing it. And certainly the first people I tended to work with were technologists. These were like coders, developers with a very strong sort of good technical discipline. The thing that was preventing them from being as successful as they could be wasn't their inability to code or to create a vision. It was around how they maybe managed setbacks, how they interacted well with others and showed empathy. So it was these types of skills and abilities that they had a talent for potentially, but they just didn't have the wherewithal to be able to do that.
Yeah, right. So maybe you would agree with this idea that 75% of those work issues, they sound relational, to do with people,
Absolutely.
relationships,
Yeah.
how we communicate to each other, how we speak to each other on a daily basis if we're working in organizations. So
Mm.
um, these are, as you said, many issues are technical, but here we see that we have the ability, as you mentioned before, to become more aware and responsive to recognize who we're talking to. Uh, and instead of reacting, we can respond. But in most cases, we react to situations as well.
Mm.
So for those who are watching on and listening into this, perhaps you can also share with us some thoughts. This idea here comes from the business case for EQ, Libby. So one of our white papers that you can have a look at on our website. If you have a look, you can sign up and download that paper. I can share a few details a little bit later for you as well. But this is where this cycle comes from as well. Maybe you see in your own organizations then, the effect that damaged trust can have on the way in which people talk to each other. I see in a lot of places where I work outside of 6 seconds, poor communication. And that's really where we want to focus tonight. The way people speak to each other, the way we listen to each other as active listeners. What are your top tips, Paul, as a coach? I'm a coach as well. We both had to develop our active listening skills. And I know that sometimes when I've taught students, they say, well, yeah, I get it. I can do it. But they don't really listen actively.
Yeah.
So in terms of a skill, do you have any thoughts about how one can truly be an active listener?
Yeah. I think mindset, maybe when you're entering into a discussion or a conversation is really important. So this sense of listening to understand rather than to respond is a really important mindset. And yes, in the workplace, but certainly even with my daughters, if they're having a conversation with me, and rather than me sort of thinking about, well, what am I suggesting that they should do, or maybe thinking about why I'm going to disagree, I'm actually really starting to go, I just want to understand more, and having that sense of curiosity there is vital too. And just, I think what I would say is silence in space is critical. How many times I've jumped in the past and said something when really I just need to leave the space for their brain to start to think about what's going on, and tuning into what's going on for them. And even if they've stopped not feeling my discomfort, oh, silence here, I really need to jump in and fill this while they're still processing potentially, a question or a thought. So just a few things there to have in mind when you're entering into that, how to really tune into them.
Mm. And when we tune into people, if we reverse the cycle, we connect with others, right? What you're talking about, curiosity builds connection. And then that can lead to perhaps people seeing more eye to eye, being able to build or change the climate of the culture that they're in, which may lead to, more engagement ultimately, better collaboration because we truly see each other rather than just seeing other people as an email address or as a person blocking their way, which can often happen in an organization. Just want to share one other page, and this is all new to you, Paul. So I appreciate your flexibility here in this content that I prepared. And we're going to get on to our brain styles and talents in just a moment. But a couple of other moments from the business case for emotional intelligence. This is the article we're talking about here, Libby. A couple of quotes here that poor trust and communication lowers productivity engagement, and that trust predicts 72.53% of the variance in overall performance. So teams that lack trust, and trust is about connection, about collaboration, about how we're able to, as you said before, create space and silence for each other, Paul, when we're actively listening. And we see also that joy is 10 times more likely to be high achieving in teams where they experience joy. And joy comes down to, again, how do we recognize who's within our team? How can we remain curious to that? It's not a celebration of achievement as such. It's really about how we create that sense of goodwill in coming to work as well. And the last idea there, that when we prioritize emotional intelligence, teams are 22% more likely to be high performing, all coming from our workplace vitality research. And I'd love to ask, Paul, the kinds of people you're working with now as a consultant, do you see these kinds of statistics coming alive, that you're seeing low trust in organizations, or a lack of communication, a lack of curiosity, as you said before?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked about this sense of like connecting with others as being vitally important, but actually I think like really understanding and connecting with yourself, because even sometimes when you're maybe working in a project yourself without even that interaction, sometimes you can respond negatively to setbacks that might sort of not necessarily enable you to move forward with that particular project. Are you trusting yourself? What is your self-talk? Are you sort of engaging fully with what's important to you? So when I'm sort of working with leaders, there's always that sense of starting with you first and having that real curiosity and maybe empathy with yourself and going, what's going on here? That would enable you to create that space then to potentially sort of interact with others. So
Mhm.
it's just somebody I was working with recently. And yes, there's maybe some challenges around how they're in the face of conflict, withdrawing from maybe others within a team. But actually, it really starts with them in terms of them being aware of maybe their own self-talk, how they're communicating with themselves, So it starts with you, I think, is a really good phrase to have in mind in terms of your ability to respond rather than how you react.
Mhm. Absolutely. Starts with us. Yeah. So let's dive a bit deeper then in how can we learn to respond rather than react. And mentioning here that one way is through our SAY assessment. It's a 77 question self assessment that helps us to understand who we are a little bit more. And two of the types of reports we can generate from that, we're going to look at tonight, and how these can be very powerful in what we're sharing as well. And thanks for your comment, Demir. EQ is powerful in building internal and external connections. Yes, building these connections requires trust, absolutely, which is fundamental in one's relationship with oneself and others. It's the soil needed to grow everything else. Ooh, I'd like to quote that one day. I love that. The soil needed to grow everything else. So we're really nurturing those skills uh, of communication, of our emotional intelligence, coming to that as well. So I don't want to show the next slide. I want to do a quick exercise with people before I show you that model, and then we can see things here. I want to ask you, we've got three different scales that I'm going to talk about now. Maybe if you're attending tonight and you'd like to play along, this would be great. I'd like to ask you, when you think about your areas of focus, so if you were to walk into a party, is your focus, gosh, on the number of people, the rational information? Wow, there's 100 people in the room, or look at all the details here and there in terms of that focus. Or is it over on the side of emotion, recognizing who's in the room, that feeling of the vibe of things? What is it for you, Paul? Seeing as your face
Um,
is back on camera now.
Yeah, and I love this assessment partly because it's in the moment. So maybe unlike personality assessments, which tend to remain largely sort of unchanged, this is situational. So it's like, where's
Mhm.
your focus right now? And
Right
that's one
now,
of the things
true.
that I love with this. So it does shape. Having said that, and I know we've chatted before, David, that yours has shifted and maybe changed. Mine tends to stay the same, and it's stuck. It stayed on the emotional side. I
Emotional.
think my natural inclination, even when I've tried to shape it a bit, is still on tuning into, like, I'm walking into a situation, noticing how I'm feeling first rather than my thoughts, or noticing there's like a bit of
Mhm,
friction in the room, maybe even
mhm.
before maybe some of the facts of a situation, or I can sense there's something going on here. It's like, it's like a fog
Yep.
that's going on, and there's a lot of, say, tension.
Mhm.
So tuning into emotional data is where I focus first.
Okay.
Um, Even if then quite quickly along that, I'm picking up on there's some facts here I need to pay
Of
attention to,
course.
but the instinct goes straight to the feeling bit. What about you, David? I know I've mentioned it before.
Yeah.
Where are you right now in the last assessment you've done?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about the last assessment soon, but I definitely feel more on the rational side. So I'll go, right, what's the lay of the land? Where's the toilet? Where's this? Da, 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 da. Get that information. Okay, a lot of people. Who do I want to talk to? And then eventually, as you said, also feel that vibe, feel what's happening there. So if you're
Mm.
playing along at home and attending tonight, just as Paul said, what's that gut instinct? Rational or emotional? And so maybe write it in the chat or write it down on a piece of paper in front of you as well. Thanks, Garda. Rational. There we
Mm.
go. So we'll start getting a few responses.
And just to it says where this isn't behavior. So people often look to how they see themselves acting, and this isn't in behavior. This is, I guess, the stuff that comes before behavior. This
Mhm.
is how your brain is sort of pulling together, that sense of where are you going to first, that thinking brain or feeling brain element. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I see, perhaps like you, Paul, more responses so far on the emotional side,
Mm.
which is good. So it's not fixed, as Paul said, and so it's a little bit flexible, but it's where that gut instinct is. All right, so Klein number two, spectrum number two is when you make decisions, again, what's that instinct? Is it to evaluate risk and understand all the parameters towards risk and evaluating things, systematically? Or are you over on the other side where you might be innovative or even impulsive in that choice as well? So for me, the example I sometimes use is about it's a hot day. Do we get ice cream? Or not a hot day? Do we get ice cream? So any day of the week, you could ask someone, well, do we get ice cream or not? So someone might say, well, I'm not sure about ice cream. I did have some things earlier before, and I'm not. Whereas others, and they might weigh up the risks, others will go, ice cream sounds good, let's go. So maybe with your grandkids, Paul, they go straight to ice cream. I've never known any kid who's denied ice cream, but sure. When you think about those decision making these two sides of the spectrum here for decisions, what's your instinct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, and this my sort of terminology with this, in terms of that, are you careful or are you dareful?
Ooh, I love that.
So
Gosh.
yeah, so are
Yeah.
are you more cautious or are you more gung ho
Mm,
and I'm just going to go for it?
yeah.
And for me, there's always that caution. I don't know whether that's a natural inclination or it was 30 years of HR looking at what are the pros and cons and looking at the
Okay.
risks of introducing a new policy and how are people going to react to this.
Hmm.
And then I've found, 2 weeks have gone by and I've not done anything because I've been so worried and caught up with how other people might sort of respond to this, or
Mhm.
what reaction I might get from it, that I'm thinking through and almost over analyzing. So I've had to work really a lot to sort of, yes, I'm always going to probably instinctively be cautious, but then go, okay, how do I then maybe
Yeah,
take a more sort of appropriate risk here? How do I
yeah.
push that boat out beyond the comfort zone, but not where
Okay.
it's too overwhelming? So I naturally sit on that more cautious, more considered side.
Hmm. Okay, good. And so for those also attending, you might like to add, are you more evaluative or careful, as Paul said, or more dareful and more innovative on the other side as well? So think about that gut reaction. Thanks to me, more innovative. And again, this is not behavior. This is really just that idea of how you might think through those decisions as well. So some responses coming in, which is great, more evaluative. Thank you. Our last spectrum to consider, and I too, I think, am more evaluative. I used to be more innovative when I first got to Europe, but now that I'm more settled where I live here in Vienna, I think I've moved across to really be more evaluative. So our last area is about drive, where we get our energy from. So for some people, it's more focused on the practical, the short term, getting those action steps done now. Whereas for others, it's on the idealistic side, looking at the long term view. And that fuels you with energy, maybe thinking about where you might be in 5 years, say, versus what we need to do next week. So,
Mm.
Paul, again, your thoughts on this spectrum. Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, well, and I always have to bring myself back to this in terms of, because I think I get people sort of, oh well, I've got a big vision, but actually the thing that they get most energy from is the practical, the now, yeah, because people like to see themselves as like sort of having this big vision, and yes, I can think strategically, especially leaders, but it's almost, but on balance, my preference is I get my energy from getting tasks done, delivering what's in front of me. For me, I sit more on that, the sort of vision and values. There's the bit where that excites me. Um, and it's not saying I can't focus on the task. Sometimes I find that difficult. I'm caught up in a bit of maybe daydreaming a bit. On
Yeah,
balance, that's where I get my energy from.
yeah.
Well, I can do the other because I know I can't bring that to life without the other existing. I
Mm.
just get excited if I'm talking about linking the now, or something's in the past. Tasks haven't got done as quickly as they have because I couldn't see that it was in a, what aim are we doing these tasks? Does that fit where we're going here?
Yeah.
So yeah, sitting more on that sort of vision side is definitely more me. What about yourself, David?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big picture guy. I think when I first studied psychology, I was thinking about, at 18, 19, I was thinking about where I'm going to be at 70. It certainly wasn't here talking to you at 6 seconds, but I thought, psychology the whole way and away we go. And I mean, much of what we talk about is psychological in nature about ourselves, of course, and getting to know ourselves. So yeah, always been idealistic. And in the years since I've taken these profiles, I may have done it, maybe 10 different times. I've certainly always been on the idealistic side. So for those, thank you for your comments before. Please add now if you'd like to share. I'm just going to reshare the screen and show you the model just so that you can really see that model again in all of its glory, because what I want you to pay attention to is remembering which side you're on. So, Paul, you said you're on the emotional side, you're
Yeah,
on the evaluative side, and the idealistic side as well. From your perception, your gut feeling about yourself. And of course, so we're going to show your results and my results in a moment on screen. But really, to build up for those who've never taken one of our profiles, many of you probably also know if you've been part of the certified network. But for those who haven't, this is also a really nice way to think about how we're moving through the world. And remembering these three particular spectrums can really help us to know, okay, what do I need? As Paul said before, my idealistic might fuel my practical side as well. So I use this a lot myself, Paul, in coaching, thinking about just where is that person right now? Maybe the person I'm talking to, what language am I hearing from them? Do you have any thoughts on how you use the model overall?
Yeah, and I know we're probably going to move on to then getting a style, and this is your brain style, and we know that there's 8 brain styles, which we'll show people. But I actually love these sort of individual aspects because I think when you start, it really helps you, like a laser beam, to get into, well, where is my focus right now?
Mhm.
How is that showing itself? So
Mm.
there was somebody that I was working with who talked about them and their family being always known for being emotional and them seeing themselves as emotional. And actually, it came out as rational. Um,
Ah,
and they were like sort of questioning that. And we ended up having sort of quite a bit of a chat. And then they sort of came to realize that they'd gone through quite a difficult sort of time, personal work circumstances, where they just had to focus on the facts and almost sort of shift that focus away from that emotional stuff that was overwhelming them and preventing them to maybe look at the logic of a situation. And
yeah.
so they were sort of shifting their brain to tuning into getting me life together, sorting out my finances, sorting out my relation, all those things.
Right.
So it just that was one example where somebody was able to not sort of look at their behavior, that has it
Hmm.
been over a period of time, but actually what's going on for me right now? Where is my brain tuning in?
Tuning in.
And then someone else, just a separate example, who working in the banking sector, who was like on the idealistic side, as the report showed, but they saw themselves as like a doer, a practical, getting stuff done,
Hmm.
achieving, getting the
Yeah.
week ahead, really delivering.
Yeah.
And again, we ended up chatting, and they ended up sort of thinking, "Oh, I've got this big vision of like going opening a cafe somewhere with my wife and quitting the rat race and that sort of stuff." And almost like, yes, they were able to get stuff done, but it was exhausting because their
Hmm.
energy maybe wasn't there to deliver, even though they were delivering. So what was the deficit that was coming from that?
Hmm.
How were they in their energy was coming from this vision of, I'd love to have, this place where we could have people come in. And so again, it just gets you to look at each of those individual factors and really
Yeah.
say, how is that showing up in my life
Yeah.
then? So that exploration is really critical, and I see that having a big impact to get people to think about what's going on in their lives.
Mm. That's fantastic. So it's really about a balance. It's
Mm,
nurturing all sides. It's not saying, well, I'm this and that's it. It's about saying, where could I be curious, flexible as well to move on one side or the other. So as you said, Paul, we have these 8 styles. So if you've been looking at this together, then you can now see which of the styles that you are more closely aligned to. Now, each of these styles, we're not going to go into detail except for Paul's and mine, which happen to be the same for tonight. But if you'd like to find out more, I'd be happy to have a call with you and see what we could do towards finding out your style or to delving a little bit deeper in there as well.
mm,
Each of these styles comes with a set of traits or characteristics that 6 Seconds has discovered in the period since developing these different areas. But as we said, as you highlighted, Paul, before, there might be a case where it at home I'm more of a guardian, but in my work life perhaps I need to be more of a scientist where I'm bringing a rational sense rather than emotional sense to what I'm doing. But my decisions and my drive are still very much the same, for
mm,
instance,
yeah,
either way.
yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
mean, I know people have put their difference where they think they are on the scales. I don't know whether people might want to just sort of based on that, just put in what they think their
that's
style may be. So if we're
that's
talking through
true.
ours, they may well be able to get a sense of what theirs is based on whether they're left, right, left, or left, 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 whatever that may be. So
That's
yeah,
true.
it'd be
Yeah.
lovely to hear from
So,
people what they perceive to be their style.
yeah. Yeah. Do you find your style there? I'm a guardian, and that
Mm,
resonates, Caroline. Good. Energizer, Soraya. Thank you. Sage or visionary, you think, Libby? Great.
mm,
Yes, so sage and visionary. Yeah, yeah. So when you think about sage and visionary, it's just as an example, it's the sliding of the decision bubble from one side or the other that would make that difference towards that preference as well. And Demir switching between Visionary, Energizer, and Sage. Fantastic. Yep, for the same reason. The Energizer, yes. So we slide some of the bubbles there as well. I like to think of them like boulders, you know, where we can move one or move the other in certain circumstances as well. So let me show you now, Paul, and my results, and just to show you what a report looks like as well, because it's also worth noting that while we are the same style tonight, you see difference because, of course, we're all different. And so it's worth thinking about what that might mean, but also thinking about it now. When you think of these 8 styles, what about when it comes to how we communicate? And that's this tonight's idea about how do we go from reacting, perhaps as one style, to responding. And response denotes a little bit of that space in between. So 6 seconds, you might say, a little bit longer even, to recognize who is that person that I'm talking to? What do they need right now? And what could be helpful in this moment? What would everything directly in the middle be? So Megan, you bring up a good point that in some cases, and you'll see this for Paul and I, the bubbles that are actually there are closer to the middle. So let me show you what I mean here. So here's Paul's report on the left and mine on the right. And what I want you to pay attention to is where the bubble is on the spectrum. So you'll see in the case of Paul and mine, the focus bubble is closer to the middle. So when we talk about this particular certification and style, we learn about sort of 4 positions on this, like on each spectrum there. So you might say that the idealistic one for Paul is further across than the focus one, and the evaluative one as well. So the bubble does move depending on how close to the middle you mean, which means that perhaps Paul, you might like ice cream with your grandkids on occasion because that bubble's getting closer to the middle towards that innovative side where you say, yeah, let's do it. So what do you see here though for yourself, Paul, when you read into this? And I know you're certified, of course, and trained. These are fresh results for you that we've done for this webinar. So what are you seeing and making of this if you were to debrief yourself?
Yeah. Definitely the focus, and I think there may be some times where so we talk about this between stimulus and response bit, and then there's the space to pause with this. So there may be times where I'm focused too much on the emotional that might get in the way of me sort of picking up what really potentially is going on here. What are the facts of the situation? Yes, I might feel enraged or sad or embarrassed about something, but what are the facts of this situation? What am I assuming? So what's the reality? So for me, that space when I'm thinking about focus may well be I need to stop myself, maybe sort of dwelling on the emotion and go, well, what's the reality here? So that allows me to maybe ask the questions that enable me to gather that data more effectively on the rational stuff about what's going on. When I'm looking at the bit about making decisions bit, again, having an awareness of my natural sort of predisposition for caution can sometimes disallow me from seeing possibility. Oh my God, this could go really well. So again, I start to practice one of the competencies, which is not mentioned here in the 6 seconds model, which is exercise optimism. I know we've done a separate webinar on that before.
We have, yeah.
So I'm starting to use this and go, what could go well here? Okay, the reality maybe is it's not going well, but it could go well, but maybe not yet. So using the power of possibility and yet to help me, but I can only do that if I'm aware of where I'm starting from, which is that place of caution. But I can still achieve my goals and see possibility if I practice this.
Yes.
So it's a practiced capability, which is at the heart of 6 seconds. We can get better at this.
Yeah.
And again, with this sense of like idealism, but I've got to make it real, otherwise I'm just a hopeless dreamer with this. So how do I bring reality? How do I break that down into tasks? Yes, I've got this vision about helping people be more joyful and successful, but how am I going to bring that to life in a real and practical way that's going to make sense for me and other people? And we chunk that up into tasks. So that's my take on those three areas, which sort of creates this sage brain.
Hmm.
Um, and if people are reading that, all of these profiles are written as if they're like the extremes of that, not taking into account that I'm probably some of something else and some of another
Yes.
profile. Whereas the sage is just, if there was such a thing as a pure sage, this
Hmm.
is what it would look like in terms of characteristics
Yeah.
and potentially ways of working with me and all of that type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's just my profile. Did you have any questions, David, or does anybody else out there have any questions about my own analysis of what that
Yeah.
profile might mean for me?
No, it seems clear, but I do want to ask you, maybe those who are watching see there's a different size of bubbles. And so what it
Mm.
means is that the focus bubble is the biggest. So this is for Paul, you see, this is his biggest sort of strength, you might say, the most activated for him at the moment, followed by decisions and drive. You'll see for me on the right there, it's a little bit different. So Paul, over time, because this was done about a week ago, and you've had other reports in the past, have the bubbles changed over time, or have they also been consistent for you? If you remember, it might be a while since your last one. Is that my internet, everyone? Can somebody write in the chat? Or is that Paul's internet? Paul is gone, I think. Okay, can't see Paul anymore, so he might come back. Do not hear him. Think we lost Paul. So just to explain as I keep going, we'll get Paul back, I'm sure. Is the bubbles make a difference in terms of that size that we see there? Ah, you're back, Paul. We were just saying the size of the bubbles make a big difference. And so that, if you might think of it, is also about our ability for strength, but also flexibility. So Paul mentioned before being able to go from that idealistic to serve the practical. Because it's his smallest, it might be the easiest to move. But
Mm.
Paul, have you noticed a difference at all in the size of the bubbles over the years that you've taken the report?
No, I always
Ah,
sell this as like an emotional intelligence report that can shift in shape, because it can, but actually might have stayed the same with this.
right.
And I think for me, it's still really interesting because I think it's still a natural style of mine too, because I think the focus bit is around almost how much data do you have?
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I might have a preference for emotional, but actually I'm not really doing anything with it, or it's not a strength, am I still gathering enough emotional data?
Yeah.
So the fact that
Yeah.
that's the biggest bubble, and that probably it does resonate with me. I
Mm-hmm.
do like to have a lot of information. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's the biggest of those three areas. The
Yeah.
next biggest is around, how much am I putting into decision making? Well, yeah, I probably put a lot into making decisions. So therefore that comes next. But yeah, there are probably sometimes where the smallest bubble is the bit around drive. Have I got enough energy to put that into practice? And there are some times when I do feel sort of quite low and in a slump where I find it difficult to have enough energy to be able to put those things into practice. So that
Mm-hmm.
still feels right, and I've got to work quite well. How do I make sure my well-being is good enough and my balance, work-life balance is good enough, so I have enough energy to bring that to bear. So the size of the bubbles is really important because it's just
Mm-hmm.
that, I guess, that sort of inner help to go, this is how they're ranked. Now, all of these might be really strong because it doesn't tell you that, or all of them might be really weak in comparison to the general populace. It's just telling me what my ranked order is in terms of the focus, decisions, and
And
drive.
drive. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as it says, I won't go on too much for myself here, but I started in 2017 as an inventor. So my focus bubble was on the rational side, my decisions bubble was on the innovative side, and idealistic has always been my strongest and biggest bubble on that side, but it was further across. Then I became a strategist. So on the rational, on the decisions, on the evaluative side where you see it now, and then drive in the same position. And most recently, this is why I was almost shocked when Paul and I were first meeting, because he said, "Well, I'm a sage too." And I've moved now my focus bubble across to that emotional side. So I'm a first time sage, you might say, Paul. So I could learn a thing or two from you, I'm sure. But as you said, there really is, and others have thought about it as well. I might see myself more in this moment over here or over there. And so we really want to point out that if you go deeper with these, this is about how we can react rather than, sorry, we can respond rather than react to people. Got to get that order right. So in reaction, bang, we use our judgments and our focus to sort of look at a situation and make a guess and go for it. We're not recognizing that people are different. And even for you and I, Paul, we are different in how we look at these two profiles as well. So the
Mm,
question is always, how can we meet in the middle with somebody in terms of how we respond,
yeah.
recognizing what partners might be or the language that they're using in that moment as well.
Yeah. And can I just add, just obviously it's not covered in here, but there's just some questions in terms of moving from reaction to response. And I know it's just like, well, what am I feeling? But actually, sort of what is the situation? So gathering the facts. What options do I have here? So what possibilities are there that you're maybe not paying attention because you're too busy diving in? And then it's like, what do I truly want? Which is the choice that's most aligned to the person that I want to be. So using those questions are really powerful to align with this reporting
Yeah.
that can help you move from that sort of just reacting in a situation to more of a values aligned decision making, having got enough data to make that decision.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love that. Thank you for bringing that attention to those key questions, Paul. We're going to move on now to the brain talents with the time that we have remaining, which is the other part of this whole brain certification that we're talking about tonight, but also a nice way to also thinking about how do we respond to others in a way. So the same 77 questions of the say can produce a similar report, which is based around our brain's talents. And I want you to see all 18 of these like a mobile phone. So, thinking about your mobile phone, you may have it close to you now. Which apps do you have up front? Which apps do you have on a second page or a third page or in your app drawer up the back? And so for all of us, we have apps that we are naturally good at, that naturally suit the way in which we go about the world. But we have all 18 apps together. It's not that any are missing, but it's how much attention that we're giving to those. So which are the ones that you like to use or reflect on, Paul, as a coach or as someone who's responding rather than reacting with those around you?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of the apps that sort of stand out for me, and I think the latest profile, certainly collaboration was the one that came out this time. And I love that sense of like creating webs of connection, sort of, even before I had this coaching thing out, it was a fairly good network. I want to connect people, or they can do this, or they can help out there. Or have you met such and such? So collaboration's always been sort of really important to me. And the connection one, although I don't think it came out this time, I think is appeared in previous profiles. So sort of working with people and truly understanding what's important to them, I think has always been and I'll say it's a capability because this isn't behaviors. These are just like, because again, you might have an app on your phone, but it doesn't mean that you're using it or
Yeah.
using it in a directed way. So these apps again are the starting point to go, oh, that's really interesting. This is a capability of mine. Am I using it as often as I could? Or I use it here, but like I've got this work problem, like that's a conflict. How do I use, for example, my capability for collaboration? Because
Mhm.
why aren't I using it here when I'm using it in other circumstances, but I'm not
Yeah.
using it in conflict?
Yeah.
What would collaboration look like in this conflict situation? Well, I've never thought of that. So again, you're using that knowledge that you have from what this potentially gives you to go, how can I use this more effectively?
Mhm. Which is a response, isn't it? It's about a choice that you
Absolutely.
can make. And maybe in that curious moment you mentioned earlier, that's a moment to bring forward this model and say, ah, yeah, that's what I need here. Fantastic. Great. So thanks to Mia for already adding in some of the apps that you see perhaps that are resonating with you right now, and perhaps others you'd like to share as well. Some of the apps that are calling to you, and we have definitions in our interpretive guides. There is an interpretive guide with both of these particular tools that tell you more about the specific definition. But in most cases, the word is and the symbol shows what it is there as well. So I see Caroline, thank you. Prioritizing critical thinking, commitment are frequently used. Yeah.
Mm.
So think of it like our email, like our phone app. To call people or message people. Maybe WhatsApp is popular in your day. So which can you make even more popular? And knowing that if I know that Paul really likes collaboration, then I might choose when I come to generally when Paul and I do talk and meet. We have a bit of a natter, don't we, for 10 minutes and shoot the breeze. We talk to each other. We really come in and connect in that sort of collaborative way. And this is not the first time we've actually collaborated. So,
Mm.
as you mentioned, optimism, and we've done a workshop together and things. And yet we met once in 2017,
Mm.
7 years ago now. But it's part of building that. So when I know that, I can choose
Mm.
to respond to you, Paul, in a way that I know will meet you at your talents as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, just a one thing to add to people if people are interested in this. So I know you made in the brain, so relating it to the brain style that you just saw before, the focus, decisions, and drive. If you take the focus element, all of the top left apps, data mining, modeling, and prioritizing are associated with the rational data.
Yes.
Connection, emotional insight, and collaboration are associated with the emotional data, as is the same with the other ones in terms of that sort of cautious and innovative, or that focus on the now rather than the future. So again, if you drew a line down the middle, you get the three apps on the left, towards those sort of left-hand side style on the scale, and the more on the right. So if you chose emotions and innovative, or vision, then you may well be picking, oh well, okay, it's more likely that the apps may be running on that. Not necessarily true, but like just have a think about that. I just think that was interesting as I
Yeah.
as I saw that there.
You're 100% right, Paul, that when we want to develop one side or the other, or we want to bring that in. So good. Thank you to those who have also shared some different apps you're using. Let's have a look at our results though, just to give you an idea of what that report looks like. So again, two sages, but with completely different or similar, some overlapping talents here.
Mm.
Now, these are all in order. So reflection down to collaboration for you, Paul, and connection down to vision for me. Are these similar apps to what you've experienced in the past, or do you see some differences?
Yeah, I think the one area of main difference is on the emotional side. So again, I think last time I was connection rather than collaboration. So and again, I think uh, my sort of understanding of the difference in that is connection is, I guess, more of like an individual thing, or in my head, it's like that one-to-one, really tuning into someone. Collaboration feels like casting the net wider. So rather than just the power of one, that sort of multiple power of making sure I'm harnessing that ability to do that with multiple people. So that's interesting that that's shifted and shaped. On the others, actually, are all sort of similar. So always very much on that sort of cautious side. Those apps are obviously constantly running in terms of really thinking about something,
Yeah.
and then maybe after thinking about it, like assimilating that, what does that mean? But then
Mm,
also with the critical thinking, well, how do I apply that? What am I going to do with
yeah.
that to put it
Yeah.
into action?
Yeah.
And also similarly with vision and design, very much a sense of knowing what my purpose is and being connected to that. But
Mhm.
then the design of almost going, well, where am I now? And be able to design and plan a route from where I am to where I want to be.
Yeah.
So it's slight, all in that same area, but all are subtly different in terms of what the nuances are. And it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Looks like Paul's internet may have stopped again there. That's okay. So I'll fill in for a moment, but I want you to think about those who are with me online to think about, okay, in terms of when you're interacting with others, what apps do they have? What are your strengths? And of course, we can measure which are your strengths, but even as you responded before, what do you see in those around you in terms of the apps that they bring? I think that's a critical way in which we can start to, again, meet in the middle. We can choose to respond rather than react. So if I know that, one of our ideas at 6 seconds is that no way is the way, meaning that there are times there where we really need to think about, who are we talking to, and recognizing that their way is their way and my way is my way. But how do we meet in the middle here as well? So have a think about which of the apps might respond to you. And I've lost Paul again, so a little bit flustered here. So hopefully he'll come back while he's out, because we may get the final word from Paul when he comes back in, if he's able to come back in. I just want to share with you, though, what we've been talking tonight. So for those who are still with us, we're talking about the brain profile certification. Oh, you're back, Paul. That's great. You were
Um,
halfway through a sentence. So do you want to finish your thoughts there about the talents? You were talking about the vision and design, and how they really
yeah.
work for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you got up to. I don't want to repeat myself, but yeah, suffice to say, the majority were the same, but obviously with some shifting and shaping there around that emotional side.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. And I was just saying, why you're off, coming back there, that it's again really thinking about that no way is the way. One of our philosophies that's really important here, to recognize that others are different. Others have a different style. They bring their talents, and so part of that response to people is about knowing, well, what do they need? What can I do to really connect with others? And recognizing that that difference exists, which I don't know that we spend a lot of our time doing. I think you and I, we're very similar, but we're still completely different in other senses. And so, how do we make best use of that in terms of our communication, bringing out the best in someone? So, one final question I have before we wrap it up is really to ask you, um, where could this go, do you think, in terms of helping teams or helping groups of people, families, even? You don't have to have any stories or use cases, but what do you see as a great way to help people to really respond rather than react using these two tools? Do you still hear me, Paul?
I can't, sorry, I thought it was a general question to the audience. I thought that was,
Well, yeah,
uh,
others can join in, but I just wanted your final thoughts, Paul, on just how
yeah,
these the two tools that we've looked at tonight, how they might be helpful to think about how do we respond.
yeah. I think if you think about it as the focus is around gathering data. So make sure you've got enough data to make a decision as you would normally do when you do anything, buying a car, you do your research, just the same as that sort of, before responding, gather data. How am I feeling? How are other people feeling? What's the facts of the situation? The bit around then making decisions is making sure you're giving yourself some options. I'm not going to be overly cautious here because we need to push the boat out a little bit, or I normally just do it. How do I rein that back in so as not to upset people? So again, using that ability to be able to do that in the situation. And then the final thing is around, okay, yes, we need to get some stuff done, but what's it in aid of? Why are we doing this? Or if it's so focused on being high-minded, or we've got this issue in our country and it's a real problem, but what are the practical solutions here? We can't just think in concepts. We need to think in realities to make it work. So applying all of those to help you come up with an optimal outcome is critical. If we're too cautious or we're not aware enough or we're just focusing on the now and we're not going to get stuff done, but the opposite applies too. So just think about those three areas and the style that it gives you and go, how is that showing up in my life and with my family and all the environments that I operate in?
Yeah, right. Great. Thank you. And we didn't share the final report tonight that's available with this particular certification, but it's the brain discovery, which is a bit of a mixture of both. And you're absolutely right, Paul, the way in which our styles can help us to learn, measure, and grow within ourselves, and then in how we work with others as well. So I know you've taken these two steps, Paul, as well as many others within our certification framework. But others might be thinking, well, just at this last moment, why 6 seconds? And you and I chose 6 seconds back in 2017, but now they have more than 25 years of insights. We work with organizations, teams, and everyone else. Not everyone else. We work with everyone in the sense of children, youth, as is now our focus in 2025, but also with adults, in business, in professional circumstances, in education as well. If you know of the book by Daniel Goleman, our founders are mentioned not by name, but by what they were doing back in the late 90s as well. And they've gone on to create this worldwide network of practitioners that is 6 Seconds and the 6 Seconds Network. So before I stop the share here, one final view, you might like to connect with us through our newsletter. So if you scan the section here, you'll be able to sign up for our European newsletter, and I've put my details there if you'd like to connect with me. And to find out more about this particular certification, I'd be happy to have a chat with you. And at some point, you could learn your actual profile as well. So thank you, Paul, for being with us just as we come together now. And anyone who'd like to, we're just on time. Maybe you have a thought or a comment you'd like to add in the chat. But Paul, it's really been a pleasure to have you with us again tonight on this 6 Seconds Europe webinar. Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with anyone or everyone that's been watching or is watching on YouTube later on?
Just to say thank you very much for coming along and participating with your comments. As David said, and I think just talking about 6 seconds, I literally changed my life since going on that course. It's taken the natural, cautious, and conservative me and allowed me to be more innovative and push forward and actually change my career in a way that helps me lead my life just happier, more joyful, and more successful to doing potentially what I think what I was meant to do. So if there's something going on, and whether you just want to do a little bit of tweaking in your life, or whether you want to, reshape your life in a different way, I would say check out 6 Seconds and the work that they do, and maybe look at a course for yourself and how you can apply that in your life, but also in your workplace too. So give it a go, and I don't think you'd be disappointed.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Paul, for that endorsement, but also for your generosity in being with us tonight. And thanks to those who've been watching on and participating. We really appreciate that as well. So have a good evening, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Right, thank you. Goodbye. Thanks, David.